Okay, here we are. Welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here. We've been planning this virtual conference roundtable for a little bit, and we're finally here, and we've enjoyed sharing. And one of the things that we talked about when we were starting to plan this roundtable is the overarching theme that we wanted to utilize for the 2020-21 school year. And we came up with cultural humility. I think it's a very appropriate theme in view of everything that we're dealing with in this year of 2020. So we wanted to begin our series of discussions with focusing on how we can maintain our mental health during during these current challenges that we're dealing with. And one thing that we're going to do today is look at mental health and really define it in a more global, a more inclusive way. So again, welcome. Thank you so much. And just to begin, what I wanted to do is just we're going to introduce a poll question and just to see where we're all at as far as our understanding of what mental health is. And it's the first question is, how often have you thought about the effects of stress on your own mental health during the past 6 months? So the options are A, all the time, B, some of the time, not often, or never. If you could respond to that question, please, and then hit submit. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about that. Okay, so here are the responses. So it seems like it is foremost on a lot of our minds, at least some of the time. So 77% of us responded some of the time, and just 15 all of the time, and then 8 not often. So really, it seems like at least some of the time, a large majority of us are thinking about the effects of the current situation on our mental health. And now for question number 2. And question number 2 is, how often have you thought about your own resilience or ability to cope during the past 6 months? How often has that been on your mind? All of the time, some of the time, not often, or never? And if you take some time to do that, we'd love to see your responses. Okay, it kind of goes a little hand in hand. Only 21% of us were not awed by our own abilities to cope, and some of us 64% of the time, and 14% all of the time. So 14% of us are in awe of our own resilience. Great. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about resilience. That's one of the very important facets of this new definition of mental health that we're going to be discussing. Now let's proceed. And what I wanted to do is just kind of get a sense of what your understanding is of what the current challenges to our mental health are. Depending on where you're working with, whether it be the health system, whether it be mental health, whether it be education, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing that you yourself have to deal with or the people that you interact with are dealing with. So I'd love to see if we could share it in the chat. And we have two lovely ladies that are going to be monitoring our chat here, Angela and Stephanie. So okay, thank you. So isolation, not being able to travel. Yes, financial challenges. Society at large, there's a lot of things that we as a society are dealing with, right? Increased anxiety. hmm And we're seeing that with patients. We're seeing that with our students in the school system, dealing with all the changes. So thank you so much for sharing. So those are things that a lot of us have seen and are experiencing. The social unrest, yes, the fighting and the rioting. And we see that playing across our TV screens a lot. We're hearing it a lot. So it's something that's foremost sometimes in our minds. So thank you so much for sharing. So we see that these are things that are unique to this moment of time, and it's magnified by the pandemic that we're dealing with, and then these social problems that are coming to light that have been festering. So yes, that definitely is a challenge. So thank you for sharing. So in light of that, what is mental health? Because that is the topic that we're talking about. So when you think about mental health, if you had to define that, uh, what are the things that come to your mind, just in one or two words? And again, if you could share in the chat room. I always forget that Okay, well, we have a couple of definitions of mental health that we're going to be looking at. Oh, the state of well-being. Yes, yes, that is included. That is included in those definitions that we're going to be looking at. So without further ado, let's start. Let's start that discussion. And thank you all for sharing. Don't be shy. It's a small group, so there's ample opportunity and there's a lot of wisdom in this virtual room, I'm sure. So we'd love to hear. So we're going to begin by sharing the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. They define mental health as being a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So looking at this definition is definitely an adequate enough definition, and it speaks to us being actualized persons, being productive, being able to cope, and it's really adequate enough. But what I wanted to do today, from now on, and this discussion, is base our consideration of mental health on another working definition of mental health that is a little bit more inclusive. This is the World Organization's one, and this is the one that we're going to be basing our discussion this afternoon on. And it's a mouthful. It says mental health is a dynamic state of internal equilibrium which enables individuals to use their abilities in harmony with universal values of society, basic cognitive and social skills, ability to recognize, express, and modulate one's own emotions, as well as empathize with others. The flexibility and ability to cope with adverse life events and function in social roles, and the harmonious relationship between body and mind that represent important concepts of mental health which contribute to varying degrees to the state of internal equilibrium. Pardon, English is not my first language. So this is a very expansive definition of mental health. And when I had seen this and researching some other things I was working on, I really appreciated how universal and inclusive it is. So I really would love to be able to kind of take it apart today. So let's break it down. So again, there are several components to this definition. And what I want to do as a group is look at how they complement each other. And we want to kind of take apart the different components and define them. And when we do this, what I'm hoping is that we can see ways that we can incorporate these qualities or these components in our lives and enhance them in ourselves. And also, I know a lot of us here present in the room work with families and children. And of course, we want to see how we as adults can model some of these qualities for our young people and even help them to work on these and enhance them in themselves. So let's move on to, it talks about universal values. And these are just the foundational and core values, such as respecting ourselves and other living things, recognizing that we're all connected, and especially so in this world now that we're all dealing with this pandemic, and seeing the connectedness, and even with all the things that are happening in our climate, for example, also respecting the environment. So, and respecting our own freedom and others' freedom. So these are universal. These are not American values. These are not European values. They're values that we all as human beings living in this planet could espouse. And then a couple of times in the definition, it talks about that state of internal equilibrium. And what that component acknowledges is that there are going to be times in our lives when we as humans have to take stock and make adjustments in our lives or in how we see our world. Now in 2020, since March 13th, it was a Friday, we said goodbye to our students, see you Monday, and we know what happened after that. So our whole world was kind of turned upside down. It changed the way we shop, the way, and you know, a lot of things that we used to take for granted. So we had to kind of make a lot of adjustments in ourselves and our expectations of our daily lives. Normally, in our development as human beings, there's going to be times, for example, during adolescence, or when we're getting married, or planning for marriage, or when we're reaching that I'm sorry. So there's going to be times when we're going to have to take stock of our lives. And even when we're even mentally healthy individuals, there's going to be some times when we're taxed by certain situations. And we're going to have to kind of pull within ourselves to be able to get ourselves back in balance, back to that state of equilibrium. So that's just something that's included in that. And this definition is divided in several components. And one of the first ones is that ability to self-regulate. And what are we talking about when we're talking about self-regulation? I think a lot of times of that 3-year-old tantruming in the middle of Walmart. And that's not a regulated individual at that time, right? So it's really that ability when we're getting some demands from our environment to be able to adjust, to resist that impulse to do something without thinking, or that might just make the situation worse, or the ability to, when we're feeling a little down, a little sad, be able to say, hey, I need to do something to cheer myself up. So that is what we're talking about when we're talking about that ability. And it's something very important that we as educators, as parents, can model for our children. And it really is tied in with caring for ourselves, because if we haven't gotten enough sleep, if we're not eating the right way, if we're not getting enough rest, we're not going to have that ability to really deal with some of these demands and react to them in a proper way. So a lot of, just being aware of how we're feeling and how much we're up to the task at hand. So those are some things. Caring for our physical body will help us to deal with some of these demands. So what we wanted to do is we want to look at an example of how we can model these things for our children. And
because your bodies are so studying.
Being able to teach children how to manage their emotions is actually a very important pathway to intellectual learning, because if you can't manage your feelings, it's hard to open up your brain to be able to receive the content that you're trying to learn.
I do a lot of work around self-awareness, being able to name emotions and then make a choice around those. You have a large range of emotions during a school day working with children. Some are completely joyful and so exciting, and some are really frustrating or incredibly disheartening. When you talk when I'm talking, it feels like you're not ready to listen to me. So one of the most authentic ways for me to help them expand their own vocabulary is to use my personal experience with my own emotions in the classroom. When people start talking about other things while I'm still giving directions, it feels frustrating for me, and I have to take a breath, catch myself, and say, it's okay, I'm gonna try again.
One of the critical features of learning is modeling. We learn by watching others. In this classroom, we see the teacher modeling her recognition of her emotions and also modeling how she deals with them in productive ways. And that is the first step in helping children learn to manage their own emotions.
Big breath in. Big breath out.
It's complicated, so we breathe. And that's how so when we're ever going crazy, it helps us calm down.
It's based on real life information. Can you make sure your body's sending a message that you're listening to me? Because it hurts my heart when you look the other way when I'm talking. Thanks, dude. My heart feels much better now. Naming my own emotions and modeling for the students how I can attach a emotional vocabulary word to how I'm feeling and then sort of articulate how I'm processing that is a really authentic way for them to sort of pick up that same skill set. And for them to also see that I, as their teacher, am a real human who's having real feelings during the day, but I'm also doing my best to handle them in a way that is safe and kind and productive. So they recognize that having big feelings are part of being human, but being able to name them and do something about them is really the work we're going to do together.
So again, we've talked about the importance of modeling self-regulation. Any thoughts from the audience of some of the ways that this teacher was able to do that? You know, what are some of the things she did as far as teaching about feelings or dealing with feelings? Love to hear. Okay, well, one of the things that we were able to appreciate is in this video, you know, she identified 4 different components of empathy. And also she talked about it being a vulnerable choice. So any thoughts on those things, on those items? And if you feel more comfortable unmuting yourself, please feel free to do that. You know, raise your hand and, you know, love to hear from you. Anything, Angela?
Well, this is Linda.
Hey, Linda.
You know nobody wants to unmute, right? But
Don't be shy. I don't bite.
but
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what she was saying, and it's true that it does feel better when you share with someone, and even if they say, you know, I don't really know what to say, but, you know, I think it's good that she added, but I'm just glad you said that. Just glad you shared that, because sometimes we don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And we end up saying something really stupid because, you know, we want to say something, but we don't know what to say. So I think that was a very good example.
Mm-hmm.
As you were saying earlier about modeling, I think that was a good model for going forward, how to express empathy to someone when you don't know what to say, because that happens, you know, quite often. At least for me it does. Even in my profession, it's like something hits you, like she said, especially when it brings up something in you.
Yes.
If it's one of your triggers and you got to kind of get yourself together for a minute. So you know, I have a friend who's in the last stages of cancer, and I find that I want to say how much I'm feeling about this process for her, but I don't, because I don't want it to be about me. So there, you know, there's a kind of a thin line to walk between your feelings and saying what you want to say, but at the same time, deciding whether or not it's appropriate, or are you trying to get your own needs met?
Right. And especially as helping professionals, we walk that fine line, right? And sometimes we feel like we want to empathize and we kind of say, well, this is, I understand how you're feeling because I went through the same thing. But sometimes it's not like you say, it's not about saying those things, it's about demonstrating those things, about connecting, right? Connecting to that hurt with the other person. And a lot of things, like, I'm sorry to hear about your friend's situation, but a lot of times we can't fix the situation. All we can do is connect with that person and know that we care and we hurt with them.
Right, right. And then when, you know, if we don't say something, you know, once they're gone, they're gone. And then you're thinking, I wish I had said, you know, how much I'm going to miss you, you
Yeah.
know, but you don't know if that's appropriate in that situation because the person may not want to talk about it. So it's a learning experience, learning how to be empathetic in the right way.
Right. And it's about, like you say, listening with your heart, and sometimes, you know, and being curious, like sometimes, you know, asking, I want to help. I feel, what can I do? Tell me how I can help you, you know, and sometimes just asking those things, what is it that you need from me at the moment, you know? So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Well, Linda, thank you. I appreciate that. And please feel free at any time if you need to interrupt, raise your hand or say, hey, feel free to do so.
Oh, you're welcome. I empathize with you doing this and nobody will talk.
It's hard, girl. It's hard because
Yes, I know it is.
into the ether, and I can't even see your beautiful faces, you know. But thank you, Linda. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
And then again, can empathy be taught? You know, sometimes you see young children and, you know, somebody falls, they gets a boo-boo, and the other child runs.
Charlene has her hand raised.
Oh, okay, Charlene, go on.
Hey, Lucila, long time no see until today. I love the video because in a very short message, it shows how empathetic the listener was, how receptive it was toward the person confiding in him.
Yeah.
He didn't make it about him. He showed that by, you know, listening and acknowledging and appreciating what she disclosed. And just like you said, as service providers, that is how we show that empathy at a higher level with somebody who's confiding in us, not making it about us, keeping that that discipline, that separation, you know, from a service provider to a service user. And it was amazing. It was a very nice example.
Thank you so much. And that is actually one of my very favorite videos. And I think the first time I saw that video was in a trauma-focused training that they had for providers. So it's very appropriate at this time when so many of the people that we deal with are dealing with situations that they've never encountered before. None of us have ever encountered this before, but more so with the people that we are providing services to that might be in a difficult situation to begin with, and now they're faced with this. So yes, we're going to need a lot of empathy when sharing with that, because then that'll allow us to be more effective as providers, because they will feel that from us. Thank you, Charlene, and it's good to hear you.
Thanks.
And so it isn't something that develops automatically, even though some children are more empathetic than others, you know, more nurturing towards others. But personal experience matters. Have we experienced it in ourselves, or have we been taught that? So culture matters, parenting matters. And so we really need to be intentional as parents, as educators, to model empathy. And we need to also understand that children absorb biases from popular culture, whether we talk about it or not. They're getting these messages. So we really have to be intentional in having those conversations with our young people, you know, especially in view of everything that's happening around us. So, and again, if anyone has any thoughts, please feel free. So just some evidence-based tips for teaching empathy, that it can be taught. And then there's different types of empathy. We talk about affective empathy, which is like more about social relationships, being able to connect with others' feelings. And it really helps us to be able to teach our children how to cope with emotions that might be unpleasant or overwhelming. And, you know, if you hear any noises, there's some construction going on around us, so I hope it's not. Okay. So, and again, going back to as educators, to be responsive to our children as we're teaching them to relate to one another. And if we're sensitive and responsive to the children we work with, then they will take on some emotional risk. Because I remember part of the video, she talked about that vulnerable choice, that ability to kind of connect to something within us that relates to that other person's experience. And teaching our children that we have so much more in common than not. Any thoughts?
They'll be done soon.
Okay, well, they'll be done soon. So what can schools do? They could be more inclusive. They could be more open about talking about racial bias and injustice. And it's funny, I was in a conversation with some administrators at one of our schools, I won't say which one, where they were responding to some prompts from the teacher, and they were talking about some of the things that are happening, you know, and sometimes in not an appropriate way, but it's something that they're being exposed to, that they're hearing about. So as educators, we are gonna have to have some of those conversations with our students. And as parents, we're having those conversations with our children. So just being able to embrace our diversity. And this is a beautiful quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "No one is born hating. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." And he said that in Long Walk to Freedom. So I just wanted to share that beautiful quote at this point of the presentation. And then we talked about, and this is something that we really could do more in the schools or in an educational setting, is fostering that cognitive empathy. Sometimes, you know, I was looking at some of the books that we have in one of our middle school libraries, and they seem to be a lot more inclusive and from different, you know, showing main characters from different social, economic, cultural backgrounds. So really being more intentional about what are some of the topics, some of the literatural things that we expose our students to, so that we can expose them to other person's lived experience, and then ensure that we're having meaningful discussions. So we want to be able to recognize someone else's perspective that is not just like ourselves, you know. So, and then we ask the right questions, like, what do you think, what are the characters thinking? What do they believe? What do they want? What do they feel? How do we know it? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen, or some of the feelings or some of the emotions that you think they're having? So really just exploring from someone else's perspective. Okay. So we talked about self-regulation. We talked about empathy. And then another big part of this definition is resilience. and we talk a lot about resilience. And the reason why we use resilience a lot, and I want to go back to the ACE study. How many of you have heard about the ACE study? You don't have to raise your hand, but and this is a study that was done in the late 1990s, I believe, and they were looking at different risk factors that people were exposed to, whether it be physical, emotional, sexual abuse, living in dysfunctional households where there were people that were abusing alcohol or drugs, or suffering with mental illness, someone in their family committed suicide or attempted suicide. Those kinds of risk factors that people might experience in early childhood, and how those experiences, those adverse childhood experiences, then manifested themselves as they got older, as they grew to adulthood. So that's why this is such an important area of study, is this resilience. And how, and what, first of all, how do we define it? And resiliency is our ability to adapt and bounce back when things don't go as planned. 2020. Resilient people don't wallow or dwell on failures. They acknowledge the situation as it is. They learn from their mistakes, and then they move forward. And that illustration that's right there, that little heart-shaped item, is an example of kintsugi. And this is a craft in art form, and it means to join with gold. And it's a crafting method that consists of assembling broken pieces of accidentally smashed pots or vessels. And then what happens is they take these visible fractures or breaks, and instead of trying to hide them, you know how sometimes you try to put things back without looking at the seams? Instead of trying to hide them, they're using gold to then join those pieces together. So the fractures, instead of being hidden, are adorned. And is rooted in the Zen philosophy of wabi-sabi. And this is something that celebrates imperfection. So that's what resilience is all about. Dealing with those negative, adverse situations and being able to bounce back, but not only bounce back, but then continue to move forward. And in keeping with that, wanted to share this video with you.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Hello. So, who of us thinks of failure when they think of Michael Jordan? Right? So, are there any thoughts on this? How we can use this for our understanding of resilience?
I like that. Not succeed if you don't try.
Exactly. Exactly. And using failures as an opportunity, as learning opportunities, right? Oh, that didn't work. Let's look at that again and see what we can do differently or how it can make us stronger, right? And there are specific ways that we can foster resiliency in our students, applying this to our work with students in schools or even young people. And I talked about the ACE study, and we use that study a lot when we're looking at trauma and when we're looking at the impact of chronic stress on our young people. We talked about some of the factors they looked at, but something else that also could be bullying, could be food insecurity. Those are situations that tax our students, that produce chronic stress. So how can we, in working with them, try to tap into their own resiliency or foster or enhance that resiliency? And one of the first things is connectedness. When we think about a young person who's been impacted by trauma, one of the most restorative, one of the most nurturing things that could happen to that young person is having a connection with one. It just needs to be one caring adult. So one caring adult will help to mitigate some of those negative experiences. And it's been proven to be something very important. So, and then it talks about belonging. How do we foster this in our schools? What is our school climate? Is it inclusive? Do our students feel a sense of ownership, of belonging? Do they feel accepted? Do they feel valued? So asking those questions about our climate. We talk about achievement. Do we find ways to celebrate? You know, we're not just talking about academic or athletic achievement. I know that's big, but do we find ways to celebrate other gifts or other abilities, other talents in our students? Or do we always find just rewarding the academically gifted or the athletically gifted? Autonomy is something very, very vital, especially when we're talking about someone who has experienced trauma, because a lot of times, and even we can relate to it now with this pandemic, we've kind of lost some of our sense of control. I mean, you know, you can't go outside without your mask, you know. There's just certain things we can't do that we used to do and take for granted. So some of that sense of control has even been taken away from us. So can we find ways to give back some of that autonomy? Can we find ways to try to give our students some choice? Can we empower them to be able to problem solve? And that is a way of enhancing or fostering that autonomy. And also when we talk about fulfillment, you know, we look at Maslow's hierarchy, how it goes up, and that ultimate self-actualization. So how do we find ways to do that in our students? Do we instill purpose through community projects or service projects? Do we try to instill a sense of mission, of connectedness to their community or to the greater good? So finding ways to do that with our students. Any comments?
Well, I was wondering, are you, and I guess it could be both ways, but when you say ways to foster resiliency, are we talking about ways to develop it or ways to build upon what's already there?
I think both, because, you know, sometimes our students have experienced so many things that they themselves don't believe in themselves, and sometimes just giving them that message like, you're strong, you know, you can do this, or you are doing this, you are you are making this, but then also finding ways for them to tap into that or enhance whatever it is they have. So I think both we're talking about that. I think you should.
I remember
Mm-hmm.
I could probably have several examples, but just one I wanted to bring up with my own life is being in, I remember being in high school and not really making a great effort to make the best grades and that kind of thing. And it was about, I think, around the end of 10th grade, maybe, when I decided I would maybe want to go to college. So we had two guidance counselors, and their offices were right next door to each other. I went to one and I said, I really think I want to go to college. And she looked at whatever record she had about me and my mediocre grades, and she said, oh, well, your grades aren't that good, so maybe you should consider going into maybe the Army, the service, or something instead. And I said, okay, well, thank you. And I left her office and just went right next door to the other guidance counselor, and I said the same thing. I think I want to go to college. And she also, looked at my grades and my school record, and she said to me, you know what, if you want to go to college, she said, you can do what you want to do. She said, but you're going to have to do some work. She said, because you have 2 years to pull your grades up. And you're going to have to work really hard at it. But if you really want to go and you're willing to, get your grade point average up and all of that, then I think that you can go. And so she kind of encouraged me that if I worked at it, I could achieve it. And I did. And, there's so many things I could say about that journey. But so now one of my desires is to, figure out how to locate that one child or more than one child that really just wants a hand or just needs a hand. You sometimes, look at places like government projects or, housing based upon income, and you see people existing there, but there are some people that are probably there that are, some of the younger people just looking to really change their environment, and they don't know how to go about it. And so I know that there are so many people like that first person that I spoke with who will not really encourage you that, yeah, you can do anything you want to do.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And well, I want to, first of all, applaud that young lady in high school that did not take that first answer and just go away and say, okay, I guess that's what it is. You had to know the wherewithal to go and get the answer that you needed, and see how one adult who can see something within a young person, even though it's not apparent right then, but you see that potential, and she gave you kind of a roadmap of what you needed to do. So those are very practical ways that we can interact with our young people and help them see something different, than what other people see. So thank you for sharing that. That was a good formula. Your resilience and determination coupled with an adult who saw the potential. So that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and another way that we can do it is just simple ways. One of the things, like, I know I've talked about trauma. I am a trauma-focused therapist, so, a lot of times I see things in that lens. But it's just small things, you know, because we talk about being trauma informed, trauma sensitive, but now we also talk about being trauma skilled. And that's something we want to bring into the schools because a lot of our children are dealing with chronic stress, and especially now in 2020. So just small things, greeting our students by name, like being interested in them, remembering little things that they might have said. Say, oh, so how's your puppy? I know you have a puppy, whatever the name, you know. So just little things to display our interest that we really do care about them individually. And also recognizing their worth, expressing confidence in their abilities, giving them those messages like, I know you can do it. I know it's hard, but if you keep at it, if you persevere, you will get there. And also recognizing both individual and team effort.
Thank God for those individuals who comes into our lives to encourage us to do better versus trying to put us down.
Amen to that. Those individuals that come into our lives, encouraging us to do better. Yes, because it's so easy to focus on the negative, to focus on those deficits. And sometimes as educators, we have to, because we need to know what we're working with, what are the areas that are lacking, but then how to use those strengths that they bring to the table to then accomplish what they need to accomplish. And celebrating those small victories. And sometimes establishing some rituals to do that, you know, in our classroom. So those are all things that we can try to incorporate in our work. And again, just some more things. Teaching and modeling that empathy, that ability to communicate, modeling that tenacity, that emotional maturity. And, you know, when you talk about communication, so much of our communication now is happening virtually. You know, so many of our kids are on virtual school. So teaching them how to ask questions, you know, if they're having a problem, well, email your teacher, you know, to teach them how to use whatever modes of communication we are using to interact with others and to get their needs met. And the proper etiquette for texting or emailing, those kinds of things, because this is a brand, you know, this is a brave new world. So that's where we're at. And again, just teaching problem solving, identifying the problem. Did it work? Did it work? Sometimes we make recommendations, make suggestions, give a plan, but then, yeah, try it, but not, it might work, you know, it's worked for some, you know, but come and let me know how it went, you know, and then when they come back, did it work? Well, not so much. So what do we do now? What can we do differently? Why did it not work? So those are very important skills, and these will help to foster not just resiliency, but also our overall mental health, because it's about being able to function within our environment and meeting with those challenges. And we talked about harmony between body and mind. And this quote is, the greatest masters are not necessarily the ones who detach from the world and their bodies, but instead are those who manifest their spirituality into their bodies. So it's really about that connectedness with our physical being, being in touch with our emotions. I know when I work a lot with young people, it's just about recognizing, identifying those triggers, to recognize when you are becoming angry, you know, it just doesn't happen. Like, what are those signals? What's happening in your body? Is your breathing changing? Do you feel yourself tensing up? Sometimes we're so tense, we're in pain, we're holding it so tensely, and we don't realize until we try to relax how tense we were. You know, so sometimes some of us hold that tension in our body and we're not even aware of it. we're not aware of our breath, you know, so really being able to create that harmony between our bodies and our minds. And any comments so far? Okay, so we will move on. This is a video on self-care because this is a large part of safeguarding and maintaining our mental health, is being able to really care for ourselves. Okay, so one of the things that I think we had included is the self-care wheel. And Gretchen, did you have that? Did you want to share that? Well, it's a wheel and it really is divided in different components. It's professional, physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and personal. So it just has different activities that we can do to nurture those parts of us. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I think we included it in, or we can send it to you, so you could look at, you could have it and just have different ideas of things that you can do for self-care in all those areas, because we are holistic and complex individuals, and sometimes we might have more of a need in one part, whether it be we're physically exhausted, or there could be days when we're just emotionally exhausted and taxed. So what do we do to nurture ourselves in those instances? Thank you, Gretchen. So any thoughts about self-care or things that you do for your own self-care? Why is self-care important, especially now and the time that we're living in? Now, I wanted to share some quotes while you're thinking about, or if you want to share some things that you do for your own self-care, or something you want to start doing for your own self-care. And Anne Lamott said, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And I know some people, one of their self-care strategies or resolutions was to unplug from social media for a few minutes. You know, sometimes we just need to step away from that phone. Another quote from Jack Cornfield, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And someone just said, take time to do what makes your soul happy. So just some quotes about self-care. Now, does anyone have any comments or questions about any of the things that we've covered? Because we're almost coming to the end of our session. So I want to give anyone an opportunity to share. I want to thank you for your attention. And what we want to do is just ask a couple more poll questions. And then we're going to end with a relaxation exercise. And so then after we do the relaxation, so that's why I wanted to give some opportunities for questions now, because then after this, we'll just end with something relaxing that I hope will let you continue with the rest of your day. So we want to thank you for giving us some of your time with us and spending it with us this afternoon. So the first question is, the difference between empathy and sympathy is that empathy feels connection and sympathy feels disconnection. Is this a true statement or a false statement? Okay. So 63% said true. And I know there's always a lot of confusion between empathy and sympathy, right? And we usually use them interchangeably. But in the video, Brene Brown was talking about how empathy does serve to feel that connection. So thank you. So it's true was the correct answer. And poll question number 4. And this is a fill in the blank. And it says connectedness, belonging, achievement, autonomy, fulfillment are ways to foster blank in our students. Is it fostering resiliency, empathy, self-regulation, or none of the above? Okay, yes, 83% said resiliency. That is the correct answer. Well, thank you so much again for your participation. And again, for giving up some of your valuable time to spend some time with us this afternoon. And we just want to, again, if there are any questions or comments, or bright ideas. So we're going to end with a very relaxing exercise. And thanks again. Be good to yourselves.
How can we get our certificates?
Gretchen is going to ensure that you all get your certificates, right, Gretchen? She has them ready for you. I think you're going to get them via email. Okay, so thank you so much for participating.
Thank you. The training was good.
Thank you. I appreciate your participation.
You're welcome.
Just one note, if you're participating and you aren't using your name, or I'm not able to tell your name, Zoom will only give me a report of like what name you logged in with. So if you want to put in the chat or email me, either way, your name that you'd want to appear on the certificate, just to make sure that I have that correct with attendance. You can chat with panelists only if you don't want to put that to everybody. But. Okay, and I am going to start the video.
Thank you, Gretchen.
place visualization exercise. Performing this visualization exercise will help relax your body and mind. You may start by gently closing your eyes and getting into a comfortable position. You may do this sitting up or lying down. Begin by noticing your breath. Notice the air going up through your nose, down to your lungs, and back out through your nose or mouth. Notice your abdomen expanding and deflating as you breathe air in and out. Now visualize a safe and peaceful place. This place may be real or imagined. It can be a beach, park, hiking trail, your house, or anywhere else. Now try to get a real sense of this place, as if you were there. Imagine yourself being there. You may include other people like friends or family, or it can be just yourself. Visualizing yourself at this place now, what sounds do you hear? Are there birds chirping or people chatting? Is there the sound of water moving or music playing? Can you feel a cool or warm breeze at your safe and peaceful place? Is the sun shining? And if so, can you feel the warmth of the sun? What smells are there? Still visualizing yourself at your safe and peaceful place, what is the temperature? Is it hot, warm, or cool? Are you sitting, lying down, or walking around at your safe and peaceful place? Make this visualization as vivid as possible. Now attach a word to this safe and peaceful place. It can be calmness, peace, tranquility, or something else. Now take a deep breath in, and when you're ready, let out all of the air in your lungs.